All right, we're going to start in about 5 minutes to everyone that's funneling in right now. And feel free to use that chat box and tell us where you're coming from, as is tradition with these. And we'll start in about 5 minutes.
Oh, Wisconsin, Chris. That's gross. Just kidding. All right, perfect. Orlando.
All right, to those just joining, feel free to open that chat box. Let us know where you're coming from.
Texas, nice.
There we go.
What part? Dallas.
Bay Area. Ooh, ooh.
San Fran.
More Bay Area and Pennsylvania. Welcome. What part of Pennsylvania are we? Philly or Pittsburgh, or somewhere in between? Bucks County. Okay, cool.
County. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Last time I was in Philly was for AOA. That's what, that was years ago. It's fun time.
Oh my God, we have a major heat wave this past week in the Bay Area. It was awful. It was 110 degrees every single day.
Wow.
Our outages too.
It was so bad.
I woke up to an extremely rainy day in Chicago with flash flood warnings. That's fun.
Ooh, flash flood.
I'm on the 3rd floor. I'll be fine.
I'm gonna say the last time I was in Chicago with Chris, actually, I think they had a tornado warning the night before, and then flash flood warnings the next morning, and thunderstorms.
Yeah.
And then it was also 100 degrees, right, when we took the Uber.
Yeah, it was nuts. I think they took everyone. I think they took all the attendees to like the garage of the
Yeah, they had to hide out in the garage. Yeah.
Wow.
We wanted to make sure you experienced all of the weather all at once.
That's just how it goes, right? All right, welcome to everyone joining. We'll start in a couple minutes. Feel free to use that chat box. Tell us where you're coming from. So Rick, how's the weather out where you're at?
It's actually pretty nice. We finally broke the heat wave we were having here. We were hitting 90s plus probably for about 2 straight months, June and July, which is really strange for Nebraska. Over the past week or so, it's now hitting the 70s, 80s, and getting down into the 50s at night. So it feels much better and starting to feel like fall.
That's in Lincoln, right? You're based in Lincoln?
Omaha, Nebraska. Omaha.
Oh, Omaha.
Just slightly west of Lincoln.
I mean, my wife's company is based in Lincoln, so when I think Nebraska, it just goes there. That's my bad.
Well, that and the university that for the football program that once was, that is where people tend to go to with their head with Nebraska. That or farm fields. And we're not all farm fields.
Yeah, I think corn when I think Nebraska.
Yeah.
There are a couple of Cornhuskers bars scattered around Chicago.
Oh, I'm sure.
So
I
it
can
definitely
see
like
that.
reinforces that point of view.
It's a very
All right.
strong brand.
Oh yeah.
Oh, Aaron.
All right, great. It is 9 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Be respectful of everyone's time. Appreciate everyone that's here, and I know more people are going to funnel in the next few minutes here. So before we get started, always have to talk about ODsonFinance Careers. Basically, the best website for finding jobs, whether you are looking for a job or whether you're looking to employ someone. And I know we've had quite a few success stories. Remember, if you're an applicant or if you're just looking to find a job. It's absolutely free to register. So we encourage everyone on this call, just go ahead and register. Just create a profile. You never know what you're going to find there. And if you're looking to find some talent for your office, it's $19 a month to put a listing up. So it's about 10 times less than your average website. So definitely put that up there if needed. I know there's pretty much everyone on here is a practice owner. And if you want to sell your legacy for $299 a month. So once again, a fair amount cheaper than other websites out there. And we've had a couple success stories on the selling part too. So we're excited to hear that. And once again, you can scan that QR code right there for careers, and that'll jump you right to the website. And we've got one more part to this series after today. That is part 4. It's happening October 16th. So scan the QR code right there. Make sure to register for that. We'll have the awesome Steve give his conclusion to this great webinar series. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So scan that QR code. And with that being said, let's go ahead and hear from the sponsors for a few minutes. So I want to introduce Rick Gunot with Aquios Alliance. And this is the first time we've had Rick on. So we're excited to have him. We've heard a lot of good things about him. The second we published, Aquios on our website, so many people jumped in and said how they've had a good experience with Rick. So Rick, I'm going to have you take over and tell us a little bit about your company.
Well, I appreciate, first and foremost, let me make sure you can see my slides okay. If you can give me a thumbs up, everything's good, perfect. Here at Aquios Advisors, we're here to help optometrists be successful in all phases of their professional career. So if you're looking to find an office that's for sale, obviously using ODsonFinance is a great opportunity. What a great website to be able to get information from and get guidance. But if you're looking to either open a brand new practice, if you're looking to buy or sell a practice, or you're just looking for help to help you to see how you can make your practice run more efficiently, our team has over 100 years experience working in the optometric field, and we're here to listen and put together an action plan that is right for you and your team. A couple things that sets Aquios Advisors apart from some of the other advising groups out there is we do things on a as needed basis. We aren't looking to have you sign in and make you sign a long-term contract with us. Obviously, we want to work with you as long as you need us, as short as you need our help doing things. We've helped doctors who have gone through partnership agreements, and some people, unfortunately, that their partnerships had to be dissolved, and we've helped doctors through that situation. And it doesn't require a year's worth of services to do that. So go ahead and scan that QR code that you see there on your screen, and that'll take you to our website so you can learn more about Aquios Advisors. But the other part that we recently launched was Aquios Alliance, and that was founded back in 2019. And Anagram and Steve were back in the day when they were before the name change. They were one of our first vendors to sign up. In Aquios Alliance, to tell you a little bit of the story there, was back in 2019 when private equity really started flexing their muscle here in the optometric field. And there were a lot of big mergers taking place between I'll say the giants of the industry. It made a lot of our clients nervous. And, did my slides just go dark?
You're good.
Okay. And as we were listening to our clients, people were saying, geez, where does this leave us with all this consolidation happening? And so I started reaching out to vendors that I knew, various business owners, and started saying, hey, those people that, the doctors that come and work with us here at Aquios Advisors, what if we were to create this networking group where we could help refer businesses or refer optometrists, to these like-minded vendors to be able to help them find great deals on product that helps them differentiate themselves from the chain locations out there. So and immediately I got a very positive response. And so in 2020, at a perfect time during the pandemic happening, we looked to launch Aquios Alliance. And we were very impressed with how well we did, even with having to do a lot of the networking and education process utilizing Zoom and just traditional phone calls. And we've grown now to have almost 60 vendors active in the Aquios Alliance. And we're very excited. And again, I'm going to say, Anagram has been a partner since day one with us because they really emulate what independent optometry is all about. I was asked recently, what are your thoughts, Rick, about vision plans and third-party plans for offices. And vision plans just have become something different than what they once were. And I think it's important that doctors recognize the opportunity that's out there for them to be able to understand how to be independent, how to be in control of your own pricing structures, fee structures. And when I say pricing structures, I'm referring to your frame and lens inventory and all. And, and Steve with Anagram, you're going to be listening to for the next hour. And again, October 16th, I believe was the date they said is the next presentation. Make sure you tune into this because, Steve and I have worked very closely together on these processes, and we see eye to eye on this. And he really knows what he's doing. And Anagram's a great company to partner with as you take that step and free yourself from the various vision plans that are out there. So with that, I'm going to say once again, thank you for allowing me to participate with this presentation today. If you're looking for help with your practice, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at Aqueous Advisors /Aqueous Alliance. We are happy to help any one of you. And again, we do everything based on what your practice needs. We do not do things based on what we think you have to do, because every office has a different layout. You have different staff, you have different doctors, you have different personalities. We want to make sure we customize a program that's best for you and your team and your patients. So with that, thank you very much. Everybody have a great day and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Rick. And once again, I'm going to put the screen up here, so feel free to scan that QR code or email Rick to get in contact. And one thing I will mention, if I'm pretty sure everyone on this call was on the Will Toe call, the famous one, about a half year ago. Will is a big fan of Aqueous, and I know he's a client of yours, so just want to put that out there.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, great. And so our next sponsor is Roya, and Roya is a fantastic website design company. I'm going to pass it over to Mallory to talk more about it. I personally use them, and I know Julie uses them as well. So Mallory, I'm going to let you take the floor.
Thank you so much. Let me get my slides pulled up. All right, thank you so much. And hi, everyone. My name is Mallory Rustamajam. I'm the Director of Marketing at Roya, and we're a proud sponsor of today's webinar. I first wanted to quickly mention to scan the QR code at the bottom of your screen to enter your domain. As an ODsonFinance member, you get a free website and digital strategy audit. And I want to mention this up front because I will briefly be talking about web design and the impact digital strategy has on your new patient reach. We are a technology company. We've developed proprietary digital marketing and content management platforms, including our robust Canvas platform, which supports eye care professionals by powering custom and highly effective websites and digital marketing campaigns. We provide cutting-edge technology that allows our clients to truly differentiate themselves from others in the market and provide marketing tools to create and track marketing campaigns efficiently. As an attendee of this webinar, there's likely interest in decreasing the dependency on vision care plans, and in doing so, creating a niche for yourself in the market, which could be the expert for a specific specialty service or the go-to for top quality patient care, the best place to shop for an extensive inventory with your optical boutique, or so many more. Your website design significantly impacts how a user perceives your reputation or your expertise, and we can help with that. I'll be sharing some examples of effective website designs. And some people may question, how does a website design significantly impact your ROI? But 75% of people base the credibility of a business exclusively on how their website looks. Your website impacts a user's perception, expertise, and how they perceive your experience, especially if you're looking to focus on specialty services or private pay. You want to showcase your experience and mastery and instill the confidence in consumers that you are the clear choice. we have worked with and continue to work with practices to amplify their digital strategy as they want to increase their new patient reach as they become more independent from vision care plans. So again, scan the QR code to access your free digital strategy audit now. I quickly wanted to share a couple of the most common mistakes made by small to medium-sized businesses for website design. For the top one, crowded design, you don't have to tell the user absolutely everything up front. You want to make the most of the most important information, but you need to be cautious not to overwhelm users. Number two, no call to action. Don't make it difficult for users to get in contact with you. You work so hard to get them on your website. You don't want to make them work hard to schedule with you. Number three, hidden navigation. Number four, bad typography. And number five, poor use of white space. All of those can contribute to a cluttered and poor user experience. And we recommend Roya and our technology to help put your best foot forward, but you also have likely tools that you're already using, like Google Analytics, heat maps, that can help you identify your top pages, user behavior, that can help construct a design and site structure that makes it user-friendly and easy to use. I will quickly look at a couple before and afters, the left before, the right after Roya Canvas implementation. On the left, you'll see this site. The call to actions do not pop in the header. The center content is cluttered. It's hard to know what to look at. On the right, the header and call to actions are clear, concise, and the featured services in the center have been completely transformed to modern quick links that eliminate the clutter. On this next example, the font is a killer. The gray font on a black background is not an ideal contrast, especially if you're looking for an eye doctor. Assumptions are you want something that's easy to read. You can see on the right that with the introduction of some color, the call to actions pop and the color blocking really helps break up the sections. We've helped countless eye care professionals streamline their digital strategy and exceed their goals. We have a case study available to showcase some of the improvements achieved both short-term and long-term as a result of a switch to Roya. And we're happy to make this available to anybody that wants a copy today. And don't forget, we're offering a no obligation consultation with free comprehensive website and digital marketing audit for ODsonFinance members. Just scan the QR code, enter your domain, and generate a free PDF that's sent to you today. Thank you for your time. Good luck to everybody on your journey to private pay. We look forward to answering any more questions, sharing any more tips, and thank you for letting us be a part of the presentation today.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mallory. And once again, let me put that slide up there. So feel free to scan that QR code, the same one that Mallory had in her presentation, and contact either her or Danny, and they'll get you started on getting that new website that's going to get you more patients in the door. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get our event started. I hope Steve's ready. Once again, this is a non-CE event. All the material is his and not ours, and the views and opinions are his as well. And just a little bit about Steve while he gets warmed up. Steve Alexander has been in the eye care industry for all of his adult life and then some. He started as an optician at age 16 and has worked as an ophthalmic tech, lab tech, practice manager, regional manager, operations consultant, and has worn a bunch of other hats in both private and corporate eye care settings. Over the last 8 years, he has been consulting with practices to find ways to better understand their patients, the ecosystems in which they work, and how to create a practice of which they can be proud. For the last 2 years, Steve has been head of marketing and partnerships at Anagram, an industry-leading tech platform, driving change in eye care with the explicit focus of increasing price transparency, private pay business, and improving the lives of patients and the people who serve them. So Steve, I'm going to let you take over.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Let me take over screen share. Make sure I can get everything set up. All right. Are we able to see my slides? Okay. Excellent. All right. So before we dig in fully to the presentation, I always like to begin with gratitude. I've got a lot to be grateful for today. Thank you to ODsonFinance, to Julie, Chris, Aaron, and Dat for all the work that you guys do in putting this together, putting all of the various platforms that you guys are putting together. It's so cool to be part of a group that is out here making change and making change quick and repeatable and consistent. And all of that feeds really well into the talk we're going to have here today. I'd also like to thank Danny and Mallory from Roya, Rick and team at Aquios, great sponsors. I think this is something that as people who participate in these kinds of sessions, it's easy to sort of listen to the sponsorship presentation,
Chris,
but not necessarily
Steve?
hear. Yes.
Hey,
Your
Steve,
notes are on the slide.
Your notes on the slide.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. It's helpful to get the notes there. Sharing my whole monitor, then that means I have to adjust it. Hang on. Thank you. Very useful. This should be just the screen now. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. But I think it's really common for folks to hear or listen to what the sponsors are saying, but not necessarily hear the opportunity. So I want to call that out as an opportunity. These are folks who are supporting ODsonFinance and what you guys do. So give them a listen. And as from personal experience, Roya is out here making change in how practice websites are and how they're delivered. I think there's a ton of value there. Aquios on both sides of their business also making headway for practices, or helping practices make it easier to make headway themselves. So thanks to everybody. Thanks to everybody for attending also. Let's kind of dive in. So today we've got a shortened agenda for like the number of things we're going to talk about, but each section has a lot in it. So if we're going to dive into introductions, I'm Steve Alexander, really excited to be here. Very thrilled to have this conversation. Before we dive into the recap, and you saw some of the notes here, but I wanted to hit on a couple of things about what we're going to talk about, why we're talking about it, how it fits into the rest of the context of the previous presentations, and how it's going to set ourselves up for the final presentation on October 16th. So part of having a successful private pay business is recognizing that you need to be much more self-reliant than one that can rely on vision plans to do a significant portion of the marketing for you. And that's not a dig at vision plans or the practices that are in network. It is just kind of the reality of what being private pay actually means. It means your business is out here trying to get new customers. It means your staff is responsible for delivering high quality work, choosing the right products, choosing the right partners, building all of that stuff in. And when you are more responsible, when you are more self-reliant, then you have to build processes that are repeatable and scalable and consistent. So that's what we're digging into here. If we think of session one as a call to control the things you can control, and think of session two as an overview for how do you set yourself up for success with a go-to-market plan, then this session takes it one layer deeper into building a practice that can make any change a successful change. So our goal here is to create a cultural infrastructure that will allow you to reliably and consistently add to your practice. We're going to be building repeatable processes, and when you're building a repeatable process, or when you have built a repeatable process, this will allow you to make the kinds of changes that a practice that is fully private pay needs to be able to make to continue to be successful, with the side benefit of building these processes also help practices that are still in network with vision plans. So quick recap of session one. We talked about where are we now. We discussed the various pressures that exist on practices, whether they're internal or external, and then we wanted to place a focus on the things that are within your control. So all of those things listed are within your control to make changes, and I know some of you have already set out plans to make those changes already, and what we wanted to do is, once we recognize that there are things that we could do, to set out ways and plans to actually do stuff. So we know that those things are all under control. We know that all of these are within our control. So pick some goals, some things that you want to change, and let's set about changing them. In session two, question was, where are we headed? And we decided that wherever we want to go, as long as we have a plan. So what we did, we created a go-to-market plan. We walked through how to think about a go-to-market plan, all the various constituents and stakeholders that come into play when discussing making a plan. And we talked through kind of two different sides of a go-to-market plan. One that is conceptual. What does a go-to-market plan consist of? How do you think about each of the different parts? And then we also walked through a sample of a go-to-market plan that is going to lead a practice to drop vision plans. Now, as a reminder, with the sponsors of this presentation, Aquios Advisors, very talented group of folks who will help you every step of the way. And actually, Roy, also equally valuable partner in exactly this. As you become more self-reliant, that means your marketing has to be on point. So take advantage of those things as long as we're here and all pulling in the same direction. One quick note, there are downloadable resources available. So after session one, I created an infographic and scripting guideline called How to Speak Open Access. And then after session two, I created that How to Go to Market plan in infographic and text guideline format. So if you are interested in having access to these, give a shout out in the chat, raise your hand, whatever the case is. We have it available for download very easily for everybody. So excited about having that available for you folks. All right, first slide for that allow us to take a little bit of a break and answer any questions that come up.
No questions yet, Steve.
All righty, so I'm just going to do my usual hydration thing and go from there. All right. A lot of folks looking for access to those resources. Dat and Aaron, I don't know if you guys have that link handy. Would you, if you do, could you share that? Or we could share it at the end. We've got a landing page, basically. You've just got to click a button and you'll get each of those things. And if you don't want to download them directly, there's a place to enter your email and we can have those documents sent to you as well. As we're going through the rest of this, something to note, I don't have a set of resources prepared as a response to this presentation. I wanted to get a sense for what the audience wants out of this. There's a lot that we're going to go over, and I think there are a lot of things that lend themselves to the kind of downloadable resources that we might want, but I didn't want to make a guess. So thanks everybody for your interest. I'm really excited about having put it together. There's between you and me, audience, there's a lot of thought that went into what is there and why it's there and why it's constructed the way that it is. So today, a lot of our time is going to be spent on discussing inertia and obstacles, and we're going to level set with what I mean using those words in this context. But before we dive into the definitions, we want to recognize and acknowledge that your practice is complex. Every element of what you do is more challenging than it sounds. You know, giving an eye exam is a simple sentence, but all of the work that happens before the patient gets there, all of the work that happens before the patient gets into the exam lane, all the work that happens in the exam lane, all the work that happens after the patient leaves, and all the follow-up work, all of it is complicated and difficult and has a bunch of different things that plug in and out of it, and a lot of psychological influences that happen. Your staff plays a big role, and where your patients come from, and what they expect of your practice. Like, all of it is fairly complicated. And I don't think we do as good a job as an industry of acknowledging how challenging the work that we do is, and how easy it is to lose sight of that. So as we're looking at this relatively dull slide, take a moment and think about all of the responsibilities that your team has in each department that they operate. Think about each individual's responsibilities for just the stuff that they have to do, and then think about what each of them has to understand about the rest of the team to be able to do their job well. You know that your team has a lot to do, and you know that they often do it in a demanding, fast-paced environment. And, depending on their experience, they'll have some amount of comfort in what they do. And when a job is difficult and complicated, and staff can feel like they are at capacity, instituting change becomes difficult. And that's where inertia and obstacles come into play, is in creating that change, especially among a team that's been doing something for a particular period of time, or comfortable in how they do stuff. So let's get into the definitions. Inertia and obstacles. So inertia, for our purposes, lean much more towards the first definition than the second. It is a tendency to remain unchanged. The technical definition is it's a tendency to do nothing or to remain unchanged. So, objects at rest stay at rest, objects in motion stay in motion, that kind of thing. But for our purposes, we're under no delusions here. Nobody's doing nothing in your practice. We're here discussing it as the resistance to change. And obstacles are the things that block progress. So we deal with these two things kind of concurrently. Tendency to remain unchanged, and obstacles that get in our way. So where does that inertia come from? Where do those obstacles come from? And I think when I was putting this together, I thought a visual example would be really helpful. So let's think about your practice. Let's think about the front desk area. Imagine the circle is everything that department touches in your practice. And then you add the technician to it. There's some crossover, but technicians are also responsible for stuff that the front desk isn't, or the reception isn't. And all of the headings here are, subject to change within your individual practice. And the level of responsibility is certainly not to scale. It's just to demonstrate how things go. So you've got your front desk, you've got your pre-testing, you've got your OD or the exam lane, you've got the optician in the dispensary, you've got the admin in the office operations, and then you've got management or leadership kind of encompassing the whole thing. And when I looked at this, as I was putting this together and I looked at it, I'm like, man, that is pretty convoluted. I mean, there's a lot going on. There are a lot of disparate responsibilities. There are a lot of shared responsibilities. And this is by no means exhaustive. This is just sort of a baseline of how most practices operate. And you start to see that the overlap is confusing, and it's hard to understand who owns what, especially if you're introducing a new thing. So as we understand that, as we recognize that each staff member has a lot to do and has to understand what their responsibilities are, what their colleagues' responsibilities are, and how what they do affects the rest of their business, then we can start to evaluate or perhaps reevaluate how we introduce a new concept. So I want to see if I'd love to get a read from the chat if this is something that you kind of feel, right? You feel that there are all of these departments that interact that may or may not have clarity in how to delineate their roles. This is something that resonated really well with me as when I was in practice myself. So I'd like to open up a couple more to any questions that have arisen potentially for what we're discussing here. Looks like we're good.
Yeah, no questions. People are excited about getting access to those documents now.
Fantastic. Great. And as another call for interaction, you guys, if you have Douglas Walker, yeah, organized chaos is absolutely right. That's a great way to describe a lot of practices. But as you're kind of watching the rest of the presentation, please let me know if there are resources you think you might like coming out of this presentation. So, all right. If we understand that we're facing inertia and obstacles, and if we go back to earlier sessions here, what we had talked about is identifying the things we can control, or controlling the things that are within our control, and then making a plan to do that. So the question then becomes, how do we make the decisions that we've made up to this point the right decisions? And that is the thrust of today's presentation. Now, that's not to say that you will never make a mistake, and that's not to say that the process that I'm about to lay out here is foolproof. It's not. Like everything, you will get better at it as you practice, as you do it more and more, as it becomes less of a concept and more of a behavior, which is actually particularly fitting for how we're going to lay this out, I hope, at least. So let's kind of look at this. If we add a new idea to the practice, when I start looking at this and I look at the new idea and I think, man, how the hell is that going to fit in there? You've got the whole practice that is, covered with the leadership and the management, and then every team is at capacity or pretty close to at capacity, and they're already confident with how they work. So if I introduce a new idea, what do you suspect would happen? And certainly it depends on the idea, and certainly depends on how it's introduced. But a really common theme that I hear with practices is when we introduce a new idea, there is staff resistance. And there is a significant amount of frustration that comes with that staff resistance among practitioners and practice managers who think about, I'm trying to fix my business, or I'm trying to drive more patients, or I'm trying to grow so that I can hire more people and alleviate the stress on the staff and all of the stuff that goes into it. But a couple of things sort of prevent that from happening. One of those is that your staff is busy. They've got a lot going on in practice, and they've got a whole life outside of your practice to consider. And adding a new thing might just be the last straw. It might just be one step too far for them. And that's something that, as a leader, that you want to understand as you're bringing these new ideas to the forefront. But there's also the tendency among practice owners to bring in a new idea without having set the stage for that new idea to be successful within the practice. And what do I mean by setting the stage? As an individual, when something changes with my work or with my family, I need to understand why in order to understand what I should do about it. So when a practice gets a new piece of equipment, or, for the sake of our conversation, are thinking about dropping a vision plan, each department that we're talking about, your front desk, your opticians, your techs, your ODs, your admin, all of them need to understand why you're making the decision that you're making, and what their roles are in executing that. And it seems like a fairly baseline concept, but it is often missed in having the conversation, in developing even the go-to-market plan that we talked about in the last session. So as you're trying to think about dropping the vision plan, I mentioned this earlier in previous sessions as well, is you want to understand what is the objective in making this change? And that is laid out explicitly in the go-to-market. What is the objective in making this change? For the purposes of dropping a vision plan, the objective is to be able to regain control of my practice. Like Rick had said in the intro, over the prices that you charge, over the products that you select, over the labs that you get to choose, over kind of everything in your dispensary, and the fees that you can generate as a practitioner, and also the kind of exam you can provide. So if you're dropping a vision plan, the objective is to regain some freedom, to generate more revenue, to be less beholden to the vision plans in any number of different ways. What your staff then needs to understand is, what are the potential pitfalls to doing that, and how do we avoid them? And what are the potential benefits to doing that, and how do we accentuate them? So that will follow a process sort of like this. Step one is getting individual buy-in. So I apologize for the visuals here. I'm not a graphic designer, but I wanted to show kind of visually what happens initially. So you bring that new idea from one side of the panel into your practice. You'll notice where it sits is pretty squarely on the individual area. So what does your optical team, and for our purposes, individual and department are interchangeable here because it depends on the scale of your practice, but what does each individual department of your practice need to understand about the change that you're making so that they buy into making the change? And that buy-in is really important. It's not enough to bring an idea and get one of your staff members to agree that it's going to happen. It has to be something that they agree will benefit them and their patients and the business. And part of this will be cultural. If your staff isn't invested in making your business better, that is a much bigger conversation that you need to have. And if that's something that you're already aware of, if you heard me say, if your staff doesn't care about making your business better, and you're like, yeah, I've got a couple of people like that on my team, that's not awesome. Right. And that's also not necessarily an indictment of the individual that's on your team. Maybe we've not done the work to get them on board that way, to get them to understand how they impact the business and how their good behaviors impact it positively and how the behaviors that maybe we'd like to alter impact it negatively. And I put together a couple of ideas on how to identify and increase individual buy-in. And you, by all means, read this. It's actually quite useful, I think, to think about things. But just some highlights. Individuals are motivated by different things. So having been in practice, there are techs and opticians who just love helping patients, and then they're totally motivated by making a patient's visual experiences better. And there are plenty of ODs that are that way as well. They're not necessarily motivated by increases in profitability or top line or bottom line sales or patient volume or anything like that, but they are motivated in the patient's outcomes. So in the case of dropping a vision plan, those sorts of individuals, you'd want to say, we have the opportunity now to select our products, to lower the prices for the patients while keeping the quality high, to keep our standard of care as it relates to exams so that every patient who comes through gets the kind of treatment we think they deserve. So that's the message you would give to folks who are patient care motivated or outcomes motivated. There are folks who are financially motivated. You want to alter your message for them so that they understand how what we're about to do will impact their ability to earn money as part of their job. Now, obviously, I can't know how your team, what your team's spread is like. I have no clue whether or not your optician needs incentives to do a thing, or if they're just going to be motivated because you ask them. And maybe you don't know that either, but it is worth finding out, because until you know how your individuals or your individual departments are motivated, it'd be really difficult to engender the kind of change that we need to engender. We want to focus on benefits also. So it's not just about what they're going to be doing, but the outcomes of what they're going to be doing. Part of the go-to-market plan is in building a culture of trust. The reason we want to spend the time to write out a plan, to think about the stakeholders, to think about the communication, to set success criteria and measure those results is so that everyone on your team can understand what's happening, why it's happening, how it impacts them, and what the expectations are. A lot of times introducing a new concept falls unsuccessful because the infrastructure wasn't set and the culture wasn't built appropriately to make this something that could be repeated in the future. So providing that clarity through communication, through reiteration, all of that is vital to any kind of change. Now, there are smaller changes you can make without going through this kind of process where, if you switch your patient recall system, you're not really changing a process, you're just changing the thing you use to make the process happen. But if you're changing things that affect every department to some degree, you want to have all of this in mind as you do it. Individuals need to know their responsibilities. They need to know how whether or not they adopt this new behavior into their routine impacts the business, and what your expectations are, and what the results might be if there isn't buy-in. So if you're keeping them informed regularly, if you're using the success criteria that you set out in the go-to-market plan to communicate, here's what we thought success would look like, here's where we're at, here's kind of the gap, and here's a plan to adjust to address it. All of those things give you the ability to be more consistent, to develop the expectations that you're going to follow up on the new things that you set out. And that builds culture. I mentioned in the previous session about the E-bar pyramid, or the results pyramid. Experiences dictate beliefs, which dictate actions, which dictate results. This is what we're talking about here, is setting out the right experiences that set up the right beliefs that then result in the actions that you want to see, and then hopefully the results that your business needs to be successful. Assuming you've got the individual buy-in for the new idea, then what you want to look at is the shared ownership piece. So you think of the new idea as it was, and then it kind of started at individual responsibilities. Now it's narrowing a little bit focus into the shared ownership. How does the change affect individual or departmental interactions with the other individuals or departments in the practice? And again, this is something that without proper preparation can make things difficult, create personal friction and so forth, all of which we'd like to avoid. Some of the things that we're going to do to avoid that is we're going to encourage regular communication between teams. And I noted here, especially without the presence of management or leadership. Now, it's not easy to do if you've only got a couple of staff members, but if you can encourage significant communication from one department to another, they can share best practices. They can share the things that they like about it. They can share the opportunities that they're seeing, the things that they're not doing super well at. But that kind of communication interdepartmentally will help make the new ideas successful and sustainable. And it'll help build that expectation throughout the culture so that everything you do will be stronger because your team has that ability to communicate with one another. Other notes here is you want to host regular meetings, you want to host huddles, and make sure that results are being reported on. There's a ton of value in how's that? Adam Schmela always says something that which gets measured gets improved, and I think there's a little tag to that which gets reported on gets improved faster. So think about that. Make sure that you understand as we're going through this that there are goals, explicit, numerical, measurable goals. And if there aren't, there should be. So think about that as you're building everything out. If you can, be transparent about how decisions are being made in your practice. We touched on it earlier with the individual side. It's just as true on the team side. Is you don't want to blindside your team with new random changes that don't make any sense. It's perfectly acceptable as a practice owner to tell your team, I'm thinking about XYZ thing. So if it's dropping a vision plan before you're ready to make the decision, it's perfectly acceptable to say, I'm thinking about dropping this vision plan, and here's why I'm thinking it. If your team is confident that you will take their feedback well, they'll give you their feedback right then and there. And usually, hopefully, if you're assessing the practice sort of holistically, where you take the staff experience into consideration alongside the patient experience, alongside your profitability, hopefully they'll agree with what you're doing, but be ready with a bunch of different ideas that you want to implement, because and so you can always have a pulse check on what your team wants, and certainly ask them for their ideas. There are often changes that a practice ought to make that a practice owner or OD or manager doesn't see if they're not in the trenches all the time. So as we kind of take this into consideration, draft your first go-to-market plan collaboratively. You have an idea for what you want to do if we're going to take going out of network as part of it. So you set your objective, you set your goals, you start to identify your stakeholders, let them tell you what the potential pitfalls will be for them, for their department, and work that into the go-to-market plan. Because people are much more likely to adopt a change when they played a part in making it. So if you suddenly say to your team, I'm changing how you do this starting now, you're going to get some pushback, whether it's vocal pushback or practical pushback where they don't make the change as quickly as you would like them. Excuse me. I'm going to get a sip of water. My apologies, I'm a bit hoarse. Hope that's better. Okay. So if you involve your team in setting your go-to-market plan, they will tell you what the pitfalls they see might be, what the opportunities they see, and the things to avoid. And you can make a decision as the leader about which parts of their feedback to incorporate and which parts to not. But getting their buy-in early on, getting the team's buy-in will help in implementing any change that you want to make. And you also want to nurture project champions in each department, somebody who you can go to in each section of the practice to say, how are things going with this change that we're trying to implement? When you have champions, hopefully that means you can rely on them to continue to push the change, even when you're not sitting there watching. All of these things are great to do initially. And all of these things I find are missing in practices when setting out to make a change. So when we think about making any kind of improvement, getting the team buy-in as early as possible and reinforcing that team buy-in is going to help make that change successful. After you do this once, you set out a plan to make a change, you get every team to buy in, you get every individual to buy in. Once you see that whatever new idea you brought in is now successfully integrated into your practice, so it just looks like your practice again. Once you've done that one time using this process, the next thing you want to do will become much easier, because you have set the expectations that I'm going to make a change. I'm going to bring it to you as a team. I'm going to listen to your feedback, or we are going to listen to your feedback as a management team. We're going to incorporate the things that you understand about your department and about your team and about the way you interact with patients into the plan, so that each department has a clearer understanding of what you do and how what they have to do affects it. And I know this sounds quite repetitive because it seems like everybody should know this. You on the team have to know what your other teammates are doing in order to be successful. But even though it is intrinsic to teams of any kind, having a set process and policy and method of doing this successfully will make it easier than just assuming everybody is on the same page. So in general, change is daunting. Drafting successful plans to set changes in motion, that takes care and commitment and prioritization. Also daunting. It's worth acknowledging the effort it takes to get there, to get to the point where you even have a plan. It's worth acknowledging the effort that you've already put in, that your team has already put in, that they're putting in even before you make any changes. But once you've acknowledged those things, you pause, you take a breath or two, and then you take the next step. So when we're looking at this, we call this successful integration. What do we mean by that? in terms of language, means that the new idea isn't a new idea anymore. It is just part of what you do. I think a successful example here, good example here, is if you think about kind of your optical department. So I know one of the biggest, most common KPIs in optical department success is anti-reflective coating penetration. And I've worked with practices, or started at practices whose AR was as low as 30%, and I've worked with practices whose AR is as high as 90%. And that obviously varies from geographically and what kind of patient base you have and so forth. But it's really common for a practice to be really good at the anti-reflective coating. And you start to ask the question, why? Why are practices pretty good at doing that, or some practices pretty good at doing that? And it's usually because the optician believes that a pair of glasses without the anti-reflective coating isn't complete. Or to put it another way, a pair of glasses with the anti-reflective coating is simply better than one without it. Because the opticians believe in it, they will always talk to the patients about it. They'll always talk to the OD about it, and maybe the OD believes the same thing. And that belief translates from one department to the other, so that the patient ends up getting anti-reflective coating most of the time. One of the common pitfalls in trying to engender change is one of the common tactics that leads to some pitfalls is engendering change is creating incentives. So there are a lot of practices that create incentives around doing a different thing. And it's often easiest to create those incentives in the optical, because there's a one-to-one relationship between what the staff member does and what the results are in terms of sales. So it is super common for practice to have really good AR and then create spiffs or other incentives for opticians when they sell a given frame collection, or photochromic lenses, or a second pair of sunglasses, or what have you. And what will often happen as a result of creating those incentives is, as long as the incentive is there, the impact on that metric carries on. So let's say you're going to offer your optician a $5 spiff when they sell a frame that costs more, that retails for more than $300, and a $5 spiff every time they sell a transition lens. Odds are, as long as that spiff is in place, that incentive is in place, and you continue to talk about it, your opticians will continue to do those things, because you're creating an incentive for them to do it. Not a behavior, not a pattern, not setting up the rest of the practice to succeed on it, but you do create those incentives. So now, as you think about creating those incentives, when your practice has 90% AR, if you create incentives around frame sales, or transition sales, or photochromic sales, you wouldn't expect your AR numbers to drop, right? You wouldn't expect the opticians to then forget about selling the anti-reflective coating in exchange for selling transitions or multiple pairs or what have you. Why is that? Why would you assume that they would continue selling the AR? And there's a logic to it. It is because you know that they believe in the AR. They believe in the anti-reflective coating being a part of a good pair of glasses. So you can take that behavior as though it's going to continue without having a negative impact on what you're trying to make that change right now. But what happens when you pull that incentive away? And hopefully in the audience, you're listening and thinking, if I have this incentive, I notice that the numbers go up. As soon as I pull the incentive away, I notice that the numbers go back down again, or I get pushback from the team saying, well, how could you take my spiff away? So there's a delicate balance to strike between creating financial incentives and creating an entitlement. If a staff member believes they're going to get a bonus every time they do a given thing, you create that association in their head, and it's very difficult to put that particular toothpaste back in the tube. So as we're thinking about these changes, think about what you've tried to do and why, think about why they've not worked. And in my mind, the reason is that we've not built the behaviors around it. We've not built the infrastructure to support it. And we've not set a plan as a team to make that impact. Sticking with the optical example, one of the strongest things that your practice can do to ensure the AR stays high, to add multiple pair sales, to add transitions or what have you, or prescription sunglasses to your average ticket is in it's actually not even in the optical department necessarily. It is before the patient ever sets foot in your door. It is on your website. Check out roya.com for your website. It is making it clear to your patients who look at your website that there are things that you value in their glasses, and making that case on the website. Then when the patient calls in, one extremely commonly missed behavior is for your front desk, setting the stage to your patient, let's say prescription sunglasses. When your front desk is saying to the patient, I've got you scheduled for Friday at 2 p.m. With Dr. Aaron, make sure you bring in your glasses and your prescription sunglasses, and you come in about 10 minutes early to fill out your form. Usually what the patient will say is, okay, I'll bring those things, or they'll say, I don't have prescription sunglasses. And then the front desk can respond with, oh, no problem at all. I'll make a note here. I'll make sure Dr. Aaron talks to you about it when you come in. So what does that do? It sets expectations among your patients that sunglasses matter to this practice. Now, I'm not saying that everybody has to do that, but that is just an example of how thinking of making a change that only affects really one department is actually something that should be done throughout the entire practice. If the front desk talks to your patients about prescription sunglasses, the techs do the same thing when they neutralize the eyewear, the OD does the same thing in the exam lane as they're doing the handoff to the optical, then your patient will have heard 4 or 5 times, 6 or 7 if you count web presence, that prescription sunglasses matter and I should really think about it. Will that translate to 100% prescription sunglass sales? No. Will it translate to more prescription sunglass sales than you're currently getting? Absolutely, especially as it becomes a behavior. And then when it becomes a behavior that goes from department to department, it's easier to build on that. So when you add to it, what you've already done doesn't get lost. So I talked about incentives earlier. When I was consulting with practices, when I was running practices, if I were to create an incentive, all of the incentives were predicated on the previous KPIs continuing as they are. So if my practice had, let's say, 80% AR and I wanted to incentivize second pair sales, all of the second pair sales incentives were predicated on AR not dropping below 80%. I want to make sure that makes sense to the audience. So whatever incentives you create, if you want to create them, make sure that it's clear to everyone who participates that what has already been part of the established behaviors of the practice doesn't get negatively impacted. Does that make sense? I hope it does. And now, after you've made your successful new idea, you can repeat and repeat and repeat, because your team is ready to make a change and has the skill set to accept change, and because you will hopefully have built the behaviors around having the conversations around why are we making this change and all of the stuff that comes along with it. But this part is probably the most important slide here. It's not about making that first change. It's not about getting buy-in that first time. It's about building a culture that has that as an expectation, where you can expect anytime I make a change, if I'm doing it the right way, if I make sure the team's on board, if I've really thought about the change that I want to make, it becomes repeatable. And when change is consistent and repeatable, it gives you the flexibility to try and fail. That's another side of this. Is new ideas are scary because investing the time to make a change and then having that change be unsuccessful is so frustrating and can really weigh on practices and make them not want to change ever again. So the idea, the biggest takeaway here is, if you set up your practice, your business, such that you can make changes and everyone on the team is receptive to it, then that change is repeatable. Making change is repeatable. And when you're a private pay practice, when you have to be as self-reliant as you have to be to succeed this way, being able to adjust is so vital to the success of your practice. Since the last time we spoke, a bunch of different things have happened in the industry. California has passed a law that has expanded OD scope of practice. The practices that are fully inundated with vision plans are going to have a tough time making that adjustment because they're seeing 60 patients a week or whatever, and their staff isn't ready to make a change because they're constantly doing paperwork or all of the other implications that kind of come in with that. But if you would have already done kind of this sort of process where you can bring in a change and you can expand your scope and you can get your team ready for that expanded scope, if there's something that you really want to bring into your practice, you're able to do it in relatively short order. When you're able to do that, and that is another differentiator for you. If you can bring in new services without disrupting the quality of your existing services, it allows you to diversify your revenue streams every step of the way. So there's a lot here, and I want to make sure that I kind of hammer this idea home. This is how you make your decisions right. Early on, we talked about evaluating what's in your control. We talked about setting a plan in motion. And here we talk about how do we make those plans successful. And those are that is dependent on your interaction with your team, because no matter how good a practitioner you are, no matter how good you are running your business yourself, you yourself cannot do it. It has to be delegated in one form or another to some degree or another. And the better your team is at accepting those responsibilities and managing themselves, the easier it's going to be for you to add and add and add without it being daunting or without it being negative. And it gives you the flexibility to fail because change is no longer scary. So you can try a thing, and if it doesn't work, okay, you will know that you set yourself up and your team up to succeed. And if it doesn't succeed, you can confidently say that, maybe this wasn't the right time or this wasn't the right thing, but our team did everything we could to succeed with it, and it just didn't work. And that's okay, because I didn't spend $80,000 and 6 months trying to make a change that didn't happen. Okay, so last quote and opportunity for Q&A.
Yeah, Steve. So when looking at a timeline for implementing change, what kind of timeline should doctors or practice owners consider giving staff before implementing these type of changes?
Timeline, I think, is going to depend on what we're talking about. But if it's something that's going to affect every department in some form or another, I would make some educated guesses as I'm forming the go-to-market plan. So dropping a vision plan is a great example, because there are some hard and fast timeline rules set out outside of your control. So if I'm dropping a given vision plan, it's 60 to 90 days after I've notified that plan that I'm no longer listed in panel. So you've got at least that much time before you have to change how your practice sees those patients. But I would have a conversation with the team long before I even wrote the letter. So if I were running a practice that is with a vision plan that we want to drop, and today is early September, if I wrote a letter today, I would know that come early January, I'm out of network. Now, I also know that this time of year is relatively quiet. Post Thanksgiving, things pick up quite a bit. So I've got, a couple of weeks now. I've got 5-6 weeks now, and then 5-6 weeks of pretty hectic exam stuff. So I would want to start the conversations as early as possible when it is relatively quiet, to get everyone's feedback, to build the go-to-market plan, to understand how much time they need to understand this, and perhaps most importantly, to understand the resources that we need to provide so that we can do this successfully. With this out-of-network example, if a practice is in network with everybody and wants to drop a plan, they have to then figure out who is my lab going to be for this vision plan, because it's not the lab that I was using before. So your optician probably, or your manager, has to then do some private pay lab research, and that takes time. similar to OD websites, lab websites, by and large, say the same kind of stuff. We have awesome tech where we'll turn your work around really quickly. We've been in business for 7,000 years, et cetera. But you have to understand like where the rubber meets the road. You have to then probably lay out a new pricing construct, or at least understand your pricing construct, and all of the timelines that are associated with those kinds of changes are dependent on the demands on your staff's time. So if your staff is fully at capacity right now, that you can't add a thing to their plates, you're stuck. You cannot change anything really. You can't change anything voluntarily. Involuntary changes will happen to you. And that's something that you also obviously want to avoid. So it's a great question. What is the timeline for change? And it is, this is kind of becoming a catchphrase of mine, but it is really context specific. It depends on how much time your team has to make the change. And if that's a problem that you're facing, and I know that there are plenty of people on this call for whom that's a problem, then dropping a vision plan might actually be a bigger opportunity for you than you think. Because like, let's take it logically. If I have 5 staff members and all of them are at capacity and I'm booked out 8 weeks in advance, dropping a vision plan is perhaps the most logical thing you can do, because it'll decrease that length of time that a new patient has to wait to come in. PS, they're not going to come in if they have to wait more than 10 days. And if you can free up, let's say 10% of your staff time without adding more work to their plate, then you can start making changes to your practice. Then your optician has the time to do research for labs. Then your front desk or your admin has the time to set up your new website, or to write communication to your staff, or to your patients, or to reach out to them on the phone or whatever. But the timeline of making change depends on where your staff is relative to their capacity.
Gotcha. Thanks.
My pleasure. It's a great question. Okay. All right. So here we are at the most important step. We're just going to go into our next steps. So next steps, session 4. And let me know if you guys are going to be at Vision Expo West. I'll be there and would love to say hello. And then register for session 4. I'm sure ODsonFinance will send everything out as needed. But what I want to call out before we wrap this presentation entirely is let's step back to session 1 and kind of walk through what is the overall approach that we are trying to take here. So step 1 is, or even step 0 is evaluating your practice. Where am I? What's going on? What's happening? What do I want to do? Step 1 then is you decide to change. That is, it's a big step. It is, like the first step to solving any problem is admitting that a problem exists. So it's a big deal. I don't want to understate how big a deal it is to decide to change. But once you've done that, you make a plan. When you make a plan, as part of making the plan, you get individual buy-in and you get team buy-in by incorporating your team's opinions, your team's worries, the obstacles they face, understanding their capacity, all of that stuff that goes into making your plan. Then once the plan is made and you set out your expectations for when you're going to do the kickoff, and the kickoff, if you'll remember, is the difference between how we were doing business yesterday to how we're doing business today and going forward. Once you have that set up, then you integrate. When you integrate, that's bringing this new process into the practice. That's when that purple dot disappears. And then after you start the integration process, you're gonna start to measure. Now, we didn't really talk about measuring here. We're gonna hit it in session 4. So sign up for session 4. Measurement. The measurement of results is understanding what results you're looking for, measuring those results and adjusting to those results is part of developing a repeatable process. It is part of getting better at setting out go-to-market plans. If you set success criteria that are way off from the actual results, it's not the biggest problem in the world, but it is something to understand and get better at for next time. And then once you've done this, if we kind of lay out the plan again, you evaluate, you decide to change, you make a plan, you get team buy-in, you get individual buy-in, you integrate and you measure, then you can repeat. And that is where the magic is. It's me. Thank you, everybody. If you guys want to reach out, if you have questions, feel free to email me, steve@anagram.care. Give me a call at my office line. It's right there, that office line. You can also text as you like. So I'm here. Once again, I want to thank everybody at ODsonFinance. I want to thank the sponsors. I want to thank you guys for attending. I would love to invite anyone who has questions for me or about this process, or actually something else while I still have you guys. Any resources that you might want from this part of the presentation. I have some ideas for what I want to put together, but I'd love to hear what you guys need as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Steve. And Chris, do we have any more questions from the audience? No? Okay, it looks like we're good. Fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead and share over. It was a great presentation once again.
Take
and
care.
I'm looking forward to part 4. Kind of getting the wrap up and kind of putting this all together. So I think it's going to be fantastic. So we do have a raffle. Got to get that going. So it looks like we have a winner here that Julie is sending me. And it is Lashante Culpepper. I apologize if I didn't say your first name correctly, but Lashante Culpepper, you have won. Email us, admin@odsonfinance.com. I know I see a lot on the chat box and Facebook, so it's good to see that you won. So congratulations. And before we head out, once again, I want to thank Steve for a fantastic presentation, for putting this whole 4-part series together. I also want to thank Rick with Aquios. Feel free to scan that QR code to get in contact with them. If you're really thinking of implementing these changes into your practice, you need the proper advisor, and Rick is there for you. And then Roya as well. I want to thank Danny and Mallory. And once again, email them, scan that QR code, because if you're going to market and if you're going to bring these patients in, you've got to have a good website in order to do that. So thank you again. And this is part 4. So scan that QR code right there. Make sure to sign up for part 4 to kind of put this all together into perspective, so you have some good info. And Vision Expo West happening next week. We will be there. Chris is going to be there the whole time. Dat and I will be there Friday, Saturday. Steve will be there the whole time. So find us, talk to us. We'd love to chat with a lot of our ODsonFinance members. Steve, any closing words before we sign off?
No, just I'm really grateful for the opportunity, and hope everyone finds value in what we're discussing here. I would reiterate what you just said. This is not something you can do alone. You've got to use your team. You've got to work with your team, but there are folks in the industry who want to help you succeed. Roya and Aquios are great examples. ODsonFinance is a great example. There are other consultants in the space, other people who want private practice to succeed. Find them, shout them out, work with them, be the private practice, be the small business organization, the small business network that makes vision plans less powerful.
Appreciate it, Steve. And then Bonnie, to answer your question, we'll send out a follow-up email and also put it on the Facebook group, the invitation for part 4. Some people can't scan when they're on their phone, which makes sense.
Yeah, that tracks.
All right, great. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up, and Dat's going to end the presentation since he has the power to do that. Dat, go ahead and do that. But otherwise, we'll see you for part 4 and hopefully at Vision Expo West. Thank you again, Steve and sponsors.
Bye, everybody.
Have a great Sunday.